Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a singing of the Star-Spangled Banner.
Right face. On guard, present, forward.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated.
No, remain standing. Please remain standing.
Please remain standing.
That's okay. We're going to wait till after it starts spinning.
Oh. Please be seated.
Thank you to the representatives from the Delaware Valley Veterans Home for the color guard. Thank you, Ethan, and Maple Point's Concert Choir, along with the music department, Mrs. Chris Torsha, Mrs. Amy O'Neill, Mrs. Wendy Robeson, Mrs. Beth Synagoga, Mrs. Joan Schenkel, and Miss Melissa Schellenberger. Maple Point students, Neshaminy School District staff, Mr. Sokol, Representative Farry, Senator Tomlinson's Communications Director, Kerry Judge, special veteran guest Deacon Gerald Schmidt, proud family members, and America's veterans. Welcome to Maple Point Middle School's 12th Annual Veterans Day celebration. My name is Carol Foley, and I'm an 8th grade teacher at Maple Point Middle School. We gather today to celebrate the 61st anniversary of Veterans Day. Our United States celebrations began on November 11th, 1918 at 11 a.m. That is when World War I ended, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. In 1919, in recognition of that historic moment, President Woodrow Wilson proclaimed November 11th Armistice Day to remember the sacrifices made to ensure freedom during the First World War. In 1954, Congress and President Eisenhower renamed Armistice Day, calling it Veterans Day. We are here today to do as President Eisenhower requested, to recognize all veterans who have honorably worn the uniform of our great and free nation. Ladies and gentlemen, I proudly introduce to you Maple Point's and our country's veterans. The 94 brave veterans seated on the stage are patriots. They've sacrificed themselves in defense of our freedom. Our veterans served at different ranks: 2 majors, 4 captains, and several sergeants, lieutenants, and petty officers, just to name a few. Different jobs, such as photographers, sharpshooters, missile supervisors, blood bank supervisors, helicopter pilots, ship barbers, engineers, nurses, intelligence officers, jet fighters, and tank gunner. And during different eras, some during peacetime and during the Hurricane Katrina relief operation, others during World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Libya, the Gulf War, Kuwait, Afghanistan, and Iraq. They also earned numerous awards during their service to our country, and here are just a few. Several of our veterans were wounded during their military service and are recipients of the Purple Heart Award, which was originally established by General George Washington shortly after the Revolutionary War. Others have been awarded the Bronze Stars for distinguishing themselves with extreme heroic achievement. Many of our veterans were awarded Good Conduct Medals, which are awarded for exemplary behavior during service. The veterans seated on our stage are among the 21 million living American veterans who have taken the oath of service to protect and defend our freedom. Students, let us thank all these great heroes, not only today, but every day, by honoring them and working to secure the blessings of freedom they hold so dear. Thank you. I would now like to introduce the principal of Maple Point Middle School, Mr. Andy Sokol.
Good morning, students, staff, and honored guests. It is a privilege to be part of this Veterans Day ceremony. I'm honored to be the son of a veteran who could not be here today. I personally thank him and all the veterans for their dedication, sacrifice, and service for our country. Thank you. To quote the great John F. Kennedy, former President of the United States, from his remarks on November 11th, 1961, quote, "We celebrate this Veterans Day for a very few minutes, a few seconds of silence, and then this country's life goes on. But I think it is most appropriate that we recall on this occasion and on every other moment when we are faced with great responsibilities, the contribution and the sacrifice which so many men, women, and families have made in order to permit this country to now occupy its present position of responsibility and freedom, and in order to permit us to gather here together. It is also very important to give thanks to everybody that put this event together. I'd like to thank Ms. Schmidt, Mrs. Foley, Ms. Reed, Mrs. Emmerich, our Social Studies Department, Ms. Flanley, Mr. Winter, Mr. Davis, Ms. Torsha, the Music Department, our support staff, our music groups, our student speakers, our PTO, our instructional aides, Ms. Foster, Ms. Gallagher, and Ms. Gall for our decorations. Hopefully I didn't miss anybody out or leave anybody out. But most importantly, I'd like to thank our veterans that are both here and on stage and throughout the globe, and to the ones who gave their lives in honor of our country and for what it stands for. At this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Frank Ferry, Pennsylvania House of Representative member, and Kerry Judge, he did get a promotion, District Administrator for Senator Tomlinson. Thank you.
Thank you. And to the men and women to my left, I thank you on behalf of our community, this Commonwealth, and this nation for your service. I would like to direct my comments to the students here. There's a lot you can learn. You're in school today. It's one of the important things you're here to learn. And your teachers through the years and as you continue through Neshaminy will have taught you a lot about history and a lot about our freedoms. The men and women to my left have fought to ensure that you continue to have those freedoms. We have men and women continuing to serve abroad in harm's way so you can continue to have those freedoms. And we have lost a tremendous amount of our military members over the lifespan of this country so we can have those freedoms. And what I would like to challenge you with today is find a way to give back, whether you give back today or you give back in your adulthood. Think of all the great things that we have in this community, whether it's programs at this school, Little League, soccer, scouts, your volunteer fire service, which is near and dear personally to my heart. But as you get older and as you grow into adulthood, please find a way to give back. The men and women here have made sacrifices so that you're able to live with these freedoms. So I challenge you to find a way to give back to your community, both now and as you get older, so we can continue having this great community that we have now and this great nation. I'd also like to thank the Maple Point staff, Mrs. Schmidt, Ms. Foley, for putting together this great program. You outdo yourself every year, so congratulations on your great work. And to the men and women here, thank you for your service. It's greatly appreciated.
Ruben Christie, Greg Dropkin, and I would now like to honor each veteran seated on our stage. As we read each name in alphabetical order, we ask each veteran, if you are able, to stand for a moment to be recognized. Please hold your applause until all the veterans have been honored. Teresa Abramowitz, Navy, HM2E5. Zach Boone, Marine Corps, Sergeant. Robert H. Boast, Air Force. Albert Brooks, Royal Air Force, AC-1. Daniel Caruso, Air Force. Elmont Chessman, Army, Sergeant. Joseph Corey, Navy, Gunner's Mate, 3rd Class. William Crozier, Marine Corps, 1st Lieutenant. Paul Day Jr., Marine Corps. Paul Day Sr., Navy. Christopher De Jesus, Army, E4. Fred D. Josie, Air Force, Staff Sergeant. Frank DeNino, Jr., Army, Sergeant. Thomas J. Devlin, Army, Lieutenant Colonel. Christopher J. Eads, Army, Lieutenant Colonel. Tony Edis, Navy, 2nd Class. Eugene Edwards, Army, Tech 4. John Flack, Navy, F2C. Joseph Foley, Army, E4. Joseph Fondy, Army, Specialist, E5. Joseph J. Fondy, Marine Corps, Sergeant. Christina Fondy Thomas, Army, Captain. Robert Gabriel, Navy, SK3. Jerry Galloway, Army, Specialist, 4th Class. Albert R. Giandomenico, Army, Sergeant. Richard Gibney, Air Force, E5. Jerry Guido, Air Force, Airman, 1st Class. David Hardknock, Marine Corps, Sergeant. Tom Hauserman, Navy, E5. Albert R. Herring, Army, Private, 1st Class.
William D. Houston, Army, E5. Thomas Kecklin, Army, SFC, E7. Chester Kellett, Jr., Army, Corporal. William Kelly, Army, Private. James E. Kennedy, Jr., Air Force, Master Sergeant. Carolyn Caterhagen, Air Force. Carol Coper, Navy, Lieutenant, 03. Harry Coper, Navy, Commander. Michael Kulik, Army, E4. Barry McBride, Coast Guard, Seaman. Eric Medea, Army, E4. Val Malashevsky, Marine Corps, Master Sergeant. Kenneth Manhurst, Air Force, Sergeant. Darren Martin, Marine Corps, Corporal, E4. Walter Martin, Army, CW02. Benjamin Mastridge, Army, Private, 1st Class. Kevin McGinnis, Navy, Lieutenant. John J. McLaughlin, Marine Corps, Corporal. Lewis Miller, Navy, 1st Class. Robert M. Miller, Army, E5. John Meadows, Air Force, E4. Ken Mosby, Navy. Sidney Moser, Army, Corporal. Charles Moody, Air Force. Barney Mullen, Army. Richard Musso, Navy. Earl H. New Jr., Navy, FTG 2. Todd O'Brien, Coast Guard. George S. O'Neill, Army, Staff Sergeant. Sandy Oppenheimer, Navy. Jack Pashley, Army, SP 5. Matthew Pashley, Army and National Guard, E5.
Robert H. Boast, Air Force. Robert Campbell, Navy, Chief Petty Officer. Les Penny, Marine Corps. Clem Piscatelli, Army, Master Sergeant. Carl Place, Marine Corps, Sergeant. James Porter, Army, Sergeant E5. Virginia Patsko Fondy, Marine Corps, Lance Corporal. Richard Quinn, Army, E4. Dominic Ragucci, Army, Sergeant. Felix Rivera, Army, E7, Sergeant, First Class. John H. Roth, Sr., Air Force. Gerald R. Schmidt, Army, 4th Class. Craig Schneider, Air Force, Captain. David Schofield, Jr., Navy, Boatswain Mate. David Schofield, Sr., Army, Petty Officer, 3rd Class. Paul Shanahan, Navy, E4. Doug Sheely, Army, SP4, E4. Michelle Sheely, Air Force, Captain. Robert Smith, Army, Sergeant, E5. George Sweet, Army, SP4. Frederick Thomas, Army, Private. Charles Van Rensselaer, Coast Guard, E5. Stephen Van Rensselaer, Coast Guard, E5. Eugene Varell, Army and Air Force, Tech Sergeant. Juan Velasquez, Navy, Army, Staff Sergeant. Dale Walton, Jr., Navy, Chief Petty Officer. Robert Weekly, Army, Major. Robert A. Weekly, Army, Master Sergeant. Robert A. Weekly, Jr., the second, Navy, Lieutenant Commander. Milton Wiseman, Air Force, Corporal. Theodore Wolthorn, Army, Specialist 4. Joseph Yurgowski, Army, Specialist 5th Class. Earl Zimmerman, Navy, Petty Officer, 3rd Class. Richard McCusker, Army, Specialist 4. Alika Oswald, Navy, ABH 3. John Dott, Navy, Seaman. Robert Dott, Navy, 3rd Class Petty Officer. Frank Honish, Army, Sergeant. George Jenka Sr., Navy, DC 3.
We now invite you to enjoy a musical tribute to the armed forces.